Hey, so welcome guys to day 2 of our Canada Bound webinar series. I am Kay Wilson and I will be presenting this evening. So if you are here tonight, then I would imagine that you have some interest in coming to Canada. So tonight we're going to cover working and studying in Canada and answer some questions where that is particularly concerned. Of course, it's a free webinar. So we will dive into as much as we can with the presentation materials. We will be taking questions. So questions can be dropped in the Q&A section of the Zoom, I would say, and not the chat. So you want to put your questions in the Q&A section and not in the chat. So if they're in the chat, they most likely will get missed. All right. So if you want them to be answered, you can place them there. Of course, we won't be able to answer all questions. And then the information that I can present to you will be, it will be general for it to be applied to your personal situation. You will have to do that, or you can work with us further, which I'll talk about as well. But the information is going to be general, and it will provide you with a general overview of what this working and studying in Canada looks like and how it could potentially work for you. So it will be a lot of information that I will be sharing. We only do this type of webinar about 2 times per year. And every year we get feedback from those who attend that it has provided a lot of clarity, and they know now what they need to do and feel more confident to go forward with working on that process. There are some people who have been working on their immigration process for a long time. Some of them might be stuck researching. And if you were here on night 1, I would have touched on that. You know, you do not want to get stuck researching for years, because the moment you are stuck researching, things are changing. So policies are changing, you know, a lot of things. And there have been a lot of change where study permits are concerned, and the whole studying and working. And we'll touch on some of that tonight as well. So stay tuned. You also want to make sure that you come with an open mind. You'll have people who come with, I want to go to Canada, but this is the way that I want to go. And then after we do a consultation, they then get to understand that, okay, the pathway that I was initially thinking of may very well not be the best one for me. And then we're looking at other options. So there are many ways to get to Canada. You just have to figure out what's going to be the best way for you and your family based on your personal situation and what you're trying to accomplish, the timeline that you're working with and all of that. And then, of course, the funds. This process, it's always going to require some funds on your part. So you have to factor that in mind. So if you have no funds, no money to invest in the process, I can tell you it's not going to work. Most of the, I would say all programs really require proof of funds in some way. Even if you're being sponsored by a family member, that family member has to be able to demonstrate that they can support you when you get to Canada. So in all cases, that's always going to be one of the requirements for the government of Canada, because they want to know that when you come to Canada, you won't be a burden to the government. You will be able to take care of yourself and your family and so on, right? So that's always going to be a requirement. So bear that in mind. Sometimes it might mean getting enough information, whether it be through consultation or otherwise, so that you can work on the things that you need to work on, and you know what you need to put in place in order to begin that journey, right? So sometimes it might mean taking a step back, getting information enough so that you can actually start working on things in the background. So I've had a lot of people do that. I've done consultations and then they come back to me maybe a year later, sometimes even longer. Some might be a month later, a few weeks later. It just depends on where everyone is in their process. And then from there, we will continue through to the application and so on. So bear that in mind. And as you're going through, take notes, you know, make sure that you're well versed on what you need to do. And like I said, it may not be personalized guidance, but it's general information that will definitely benefit you. And you know, you want to stay clear of all distractions so that you can focus on what is being presented. And that's the only way that the session will definitely be of use to you. All right. So I am gonna dive into the information. The session is also being recorded. We will make the recordings available at some point later this week. So if you missed day one, you might be able to catch up. I would love to get a feel of who is here though. Let me know in the chat if you were here on day one. And at least I'll know too what I need to cover tonight. Okay, so I'm seeing that. So who wasn't here? Who was here and who? I see a lot of people who said they were here. Some people missed the first night. Okay. So if you missed yesterday, then you missed something. So you need to go back and catch up on that. And so you can have like a clear picture of the options that are available and what you need to do. So we will get started. And then at the end of tonight's presentation, we will try to answer some of the questions. We may not get to all of them, but we'll try to see how much we can get to tonight. It shouldn't be too long, so it's not going to be a very long session. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about studying in Canada / working, how that whole process works. I'll look at a case study and a couple case studies as we go through, and we will top it off with how we can support you on your journey if you're looking for support, so how we could work with you on that process. So I represent Northern Connections Canada Immigration. We are an immigration and education consulting firm located in Regina. So we're in Regina in Saskatchewan, Canada. And from here, we serve clients in many different countries. The Americas, especially, we serve some clients from Asian countries. So we serve clients in many different regions, and also those who are in Canada. So we'll have a lot of clients as well who are in Canada who might be looking to secure some status here or change their status or remain permanently. And that's our license number on the screen. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So as the lead consultant with Northern Connections Canada, through my licensing with the college, so we're licensed through the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. And this is the regulatory body in Canada that regulates immigration in Canada. So if you're thinking or looking to work with anyone at all to assist you with any sort of immigration application, this would be the website to visit. So this is the regulators website. On their website, they do have a members directory. So they have a public register. And in this public register, it's there for the public. As the name suggests, it's where you can go. You can visit the site and you can punch in. So you could put in the name of the consultant or the name of the company to view their licensing information. So this basically gives you assurance that whomever you're engaging is authorized to do the work that they are purporting to do, right? And it's very important because it protects you, and it ensures that you are protected and in good hands, at least as much as you can research. So you want to look at the directory, you want to look at social media, you want to look at their website. All of those things are there for your benefit. But most importantly would be to definitely check the regulator's site. You'll have a lot of companies like travel agents and so on who process application, but they're not really supposed to because they're not licensed to do that. And what can happen in those cases, from what I've seen, so I've worked with a lot of clients who would have gotten a previous refusal. So we handle a lot of previously refused applications, whether that be a work permit or a study permit or a visitor's visa. Those are some of the temporary residence ones. What we see with those, you'll have those clients who may go to some agent to assist them with the application. They may or may not know that this person is not registered to do this type of work. And then it ends up being that IRCC, that's the government of Canada, refuses the application because they are working with an unauthorized agent, or the application is just refused because it wasn't prepared properly, right? So they can do that. They can also you can also be found for misrepresentation. So if IRCC releases a finding of misrepresentation on your application, you can be subject to a 5-year ban. With this 5-year ban, you cannot apply to come to Canada for that 5-year period. And it also impacts your family members. So neither yourself nor family members will be able to apply to come to Canada for any status. And has rippling implications as well. So even after that period of 5 years has passed, it can be very difficult for you to really be granted any sort of status or documents in Canada. So you have to be very careful and protect your investment, protect your Canadian dream. So make sure that you do your due diligence and work with authorized personnel only. Next is, and I covered this last night, a little bit about me. So aside from being an well, it's used to, we used to call it ICCRC, it's now CICC. So aside from being a CICC member, I'm also a member of the Canadian Association of Professional Immigration Consultants. So it's called CAPIC. And so it's an association that's in Canada and that supports the immigration industry in terms of immigration professionals. I work with the Saskatchewan government through licensing as a recruiter and foreign worker recruiter, as well as an immigration license with Saskatchewan as well. And I have membership with CPA Canada, through which we do also financial literacy training. So a lot of newcomers who come to Canada would go through some of these trainings that we provide through CPA Canada to help them get acquainted with finances in Canada and how all of that plays together. Also, one of the ambassadors for it's a local government woman-owned business Saskatchewan. So I'm one of the ambassadors for that. So that's just a little bit more about myself. And now I'm going to go to our first poll, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this. Right, so this is the first poll, and the question is, are you considering studying in Canada? Is that why you're here tonight? I'll give you a minute to do that. A couple more seconds. All right, so from this poll, I see most of you, you're in the right place. So about 43% of you are looking to study in Canada. 26% says work only. And we have some that are undecided, about 14% undecided. And about 9% says it's their last resort. All right, interesting. All right, let's continue. Thanks for... All right, so I'm going to talk about why people study in Canada. And some of you may know this. You will have your own personal reasons why you might want to study. One of the things that attracts a lot of people is the multicultural and the diverse classrooms that are in Canada. So if you go to school in Canada, you're going to find that your classroom would be filled with students from all over the world, right? So that's definitely one thing that you will see for Canada. Canada has the highest per capita immigration rate around the world. The opportunity to become a permanent resident, I know that's one of the main ones for a lot of people. With the pathway of studying presents you with the opportunity to apply for permanent residency eventually. So that's a good thing. And I think that's probably one of the primary reasons for most of you. Healthy and safe communities. When we did a poll last night, one of the things that people said that was a motivation for them to come to Canada was safety and security. And you'll find that Canada is generally safe. I can personally walk in my neighborhood at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I feel safe. It's relatively safe for the most part. And it will just depend also on where you are, what community you live in, and all of those things. But generally, Canadians are generally tolerant and welcoming to newcomers. So, and Canada is usually ranked in every year when they have those rankings by the UN. Canada is usually one of those countries that are listed as one of the best places to live. And then, of course, affordable tuition. I would say compared to studying in the US and the UK, Canadian tuition rates are very comparable. If you compare it to what domestic students are paying, you may not find that it's affordable. But if you compare it to what the going rate will be for tuition in other countries, it's very comparable. Okay, I'm gonna talk about provinces. So this is where most of the international students who come to Canada go. As you can see, the vast majority go to Ontario, right? So 51% of recent international students who come to Canada tend to settle or go to Ontario to complete their studies. What we've seen though in recent times, there's been a lot of internal migration. So we're seeing people, they may come to Canada, to Ontario to study, and then maybe because of the permanent residency pathways being available in other countries or in other provinces, I should say, where it might be a lot easier for them to convert from student status or a temporary status to a permanent resident status, they may move. So there's been a lot of that, especially in the last year, a lot of movement from Ontario to Alberta to Saskatchewan, and also to the maritime provinces, where people are looking for ways that they can stay in Canada permanently. And then not only that, cost of living. That has been a huge pull factor too, why people are moving to other provinces. So definitely more than half of Canada's population is in Ontario. So of course, if you go to Ontario, there's a lot more competition. There will be a lot more competition for jobs, for example. And then the cost of living, of course, will be a little bit higher, right? So that all plays a factor. You'll see a lot more people are going to some of the smaller provinces. So traditionally, people will come to Canada and they'll go to Ontario, British Columbia, or Quebec. And then following that, it might be Alberta, right? So that's how it is traditionally. But there's more people, more people are looking to go to some of the other smaller provinces where there will be a lot more opportunities. Okay. So, of course, with coming to Canada, a study permit will be needed. So a study permit is required by all foreign nationals. So once you're a foreign national, regardless of what your nationality is, if you're going to study in Canada for more than 6 months, you will need a study permit. And that study permit will be for studies at a designated learning institution. If you're studying for less than 6 months, then a study permit generally is not required. But if you're going to be longer than that, then you'll need a study permit. Also, where the work option comes into play is the longer term studies. So in order for you to really benefit from the opportunity to work post-studies, your program will need to be at least 8 months in length. So the duration of your program must be for at least 8 months. And of course, it must be completed at a designated learning institution as well. And there are some other, little intricacies where that's concerned, but generally this is really it, right? At least 8 months. It doesn't have to be 2 years, 3 years, at least 8 months. And some of these 8 months programs are in fact, some of the 1-year programs. So you'll see a lot of programs that are termed like 1-year certificates or 1-year postgrad certificates. A lot of them are 8 months programs. You'll only be studying for 8 months, but the program itself is described as a 1-year program, and the study permit and work permit that you may get at the end will also be for 1 year. So here's some quick facts. There's quite a bit of international students who are in Canada right now. And that's because there's, like I mentioned last night, there's a lot of competition in the permanent residency programs. Most of them are now pool format. So candidates are going into an expression of interest pool. And you'll find that a lot of candidates going to the pool, but maybe their profiles might not be as competitive and they're not being selected in these pools. And so one of the avenues, it's not the only avenue, but one of the avenues that most people will then try to engage to help to increase their scores or to get to Canada faster would be the option of studying. And so you'll find that because of that, a lot more people are opting to study. And the truth is, for some people, it might be the main pathway or the only pathway really that makes sense, right? So in 2023 alone, there were over 900,000 international students in Canada. And that increased by at least 100,000 compared to the previous year in 2022. So 2022 was thought to be really high, but 2023 actually superseded that, right? And so there's the expectation by 2027, Canada will have about 1.4 million international students. And there's some talk currently going on with the government about what they plan to do with this particular program. I'll touch on it a little bit as we go along, but that's what's happening currently. And 90% of international students tend to recommend Canada, right, as a study destination. So that's pretty high. And then at least 60% plan to apply for permanent residency. So this is a case study for one of my former clients. When she came to Canada to study, she was 27. She worked in Jamaica as a bank teller and did well in school, but after completing her degree, she was finding it a little too difficult to really make ends meet. She was struggling. And then also being from a low income family was very difficult for her. So she wanted to be able to help her family and, of course, be able to access certain career opportunities and advancement. So she didn't have the funds initially to come, but she was determined that she's going to come to Canada and she's going to pursue her master's. She was able to acquire some funds from loans, from contributions or loans from family members. And even when she came, she didn't have all of the funds that she needed for the 2 years. Her master's program is going to be 2 years. So she didn't have all that money, but she worked while studying. And then she got support otherwise. So she was able to make it work for her. She was able to get scholarships along the way to help to fund her studies. Her program also was one of those that had a co-op option. So she had a work term as part of her program. And that helped her a lot because the work term was with a government agency. And so with that particular work term, at the end of it, it doesn't always happen this way, but I've seen it happen for a few people. She actually studied in Saskatchewan, by the way. But at the end of that work term, she was kept on by that particular agency permanently. So she was offered a permanent position. It was first temporary and then it transitioned to permanent. But the point of it is she was actually kept on, right? They didn't have to do that. And so she was able to work herself into a permanent position. This was able to help with supporting herself through that work term and the stipend that they got, in addition to, at the end of her program, not having to look for work because she already had a job. And the job was with a government agency. Governments in Canada tend to pay well. This was with a provincial government. And so even to this day, she's still working with a provincial agency. And so that was able to really help her to get well-needed Canadian work experience and then work her way up into different positions and put her master's studies that she did to use. So it worked out pretty well for her. She's now a Canadian citizen, and like I said, she's still working with government. I think generally, especially for like the Saskatchewan public sector, once you get into the public sector, people usually stay there for like 20 years. They never leave because it's going to be one of the easiest jobs. It pays well, there's job security, all of that. I've had quite a bit of my clients who get jobs within the public sector. They are one of the largest employers in the province, but it worked well for her. And so this is one of those stories where you can see yourself, if you can identify with anything that she had to go through, how it worked out for her. All right, so generally to study in Canada, there are 2 steps. So one is program acceptance at a DLI, so you have to get an acceptance letter. And then the second step is your study permit. With your letter of acceptance, like I mentioned, it has to be with a designated learning institution. There are quite a bit of designated learning institutions, and the thing to be mindful of here, though, is that not all DLIs are public institutions. There are some that are private, and generally the private ones will not, they will have a lower tuition. So the tuition compared to like the public institution will be less for private institutions. However, on the flip side, the studying at a private institution will, in most cases, not result in you being eligible for the post-graduation work permit, which is that work permit that you need post studies to really make studying in Canada fruitful for you. So some people have gone ahead and they have studied with private institutions, but at the end of it, though, you will be left trying to find an employer to assist you maybe with an LMIA of some sorts in order for you to continue or for you to stay in Canada and to work, because it doesn't come with that right to apply for a work permit. So that's the main difference. And that's a very important difference, right? So you don't want to spend all that money to come and study, and then at the end of the day, you cannot really get that work benefit that you need. If you have been accepted into a private institution, you can always change, right? So I've come across students who may be in their first year in Canada, and then, they didn't know all of this when they were going through the process, or it could have been just because of funds, but, we work with them to help them to make that transition while they're in Canada so that they can get the benefit of the work option. Also important is if your DLI is private, if it's not a postgrad work permit eligible institution, then your spouse also cannot work. And that's another one of the benefits, right, of getting a study permit, because it allows you to bring your family with you. That's one thing to bear in mind. DLIs are for colleges, universities, all institutions. We have secondary schools, primary schools that are DLIs as well, right? So it's not just for adults, children can also come to Canada and study. And then, of course, the second step is study permit. So this is where you would apply for your study permit. Before I even touch on study permit, though, like there has been a couple of reforms that the government has made in recent times. So one of them that came law essentially on December 1st was the fact that DLIs your school will now have to confirm your offer with IRCC. And what I have seen so far with this change is it's been resulting in some study permit applications being withdrawn, just being canceled by IRCC. So you have to be very careful about the school that you're choosing as well, because what has happened with some of these applications, they apply for their study permits, but then IRCC gives the schools usually about 10 days with this new change. They will give the schools 10 days to confirm your offer, right? So there's a process that they work with the schools, and the school must confirm with IRCC that they, in fact, have issued you this offer of acceptance. If the school does not confirm within that timeline, IRCC will go ahead and cancel your study permit. So they'll refund if it's not a refusal, but it's a cancellation. So it means that you have to start all over again. They will refund your fees and everything, but they'll send back your application to you. So one thing to bear in mind, the school must be chosen wisely. We have a list of, so we have a number of schools across Canada that we actually work with. So a lot of our clients that we do work with, we help them to secure admission as well into programs that will help them in different ways. And I'll talk about that, but we help with that part of the process as well, because it's so important. They're both important. Of course, the study permit is a really big deal, but this first step is also very important. So you want to make sure that you're choosing the right schools. One of the other things that they will be doing, which is this year, they're going to have like different tiers almost of institution, because you have some schools that they just issue letters, right? Some of them, they'll just issue a letter of acceptance, and later on, you just get a random notification that your offer has been withdrawn. And can you imagine that if you have already submitted your application for study permit, IRCC will be confirming with the school, and the school is telling you that they've withdrawn your offer for no reason. You've already paid your fees. I've seen some of those cases as well. So you just want to be very careful. Yeah, but we do have a list of, we do have a number of schools, I should say, that we work with across Canada. So we also do assist with the step one, which is the letter of acceptance, getting accepted into a program. We do a program search. So this is where we're looking at your background and then helping you to find a program that will be beneficial for your application, right? Because it has to make sense for the application based on your background. The second thing is programs that will help you to find jobs, right? You want to be able to find a job after you've studied. And then a program that can help with PR as well, in a province that can help with PR. So those are the three integral things to consider when you're choosing your program. And if you need support with that, feel free to reach out to myself or my team. You can send us an email, info@nccanadaimmigration.com, where that part is concerned. So the second step is the study permit. And I'll touch on study permit in more detail, but essentially this is another important step because this is your authorization to start studying in Canada. If this get accepted into the school, but then the study permit is not granted, you still can't come to Canada. So it's very important, and a lot of work goes into it. We do a lot of study permit applications every cycle. So generally schools will have intakes of September, January, and May. So those are the intakes, and you generally will have to apply, of course, in advance of you being ready to start school. So a question for you guys. Do you think, and you can respond in the chat, international students contribute over 36 billion to Canada's economy? Is that true? Or is that a myth? Is it more? Is it less? What do you think? Okay, I see most people are saying true. Somebody says it's a myth. More. Okay, Silvern says more. It is in fact true, and it's probably even more. So international students do contribute quite a bit to Canada's over 36 billion, and help to sustain over 170,000 jobs. It's likely more. Of course, I actually saw a documentary the other day, and it was featuring a really big, I don't say the name of the school, but it was featuring a school in Nova Scotia, one of the bigger schools there, a bigger university. And that school was going under a few years ago. They did not have enough student population to sustain the school's budget, right? So this was actually going to shut down. What actually revived that school was the fact that they started accepting international students. And now it's one of the biggest institutions in the province offering programs, right? And why they were in this documentary was because they were issuing more letters to students, international students, than they had spots. And so students would go to school, and then they would find that the enough spaces for the lecture rooms and stuff like that. So that school was able to turn their around by offering spots to international students, because of course international students pay at least 2 to 3 times more tuition than Canadians do. And a big part of that is one, and the government knows this, the schools, they know this as well. Students come to study, at least a lot of them, they come for that additional benefit to be able to remain in Canada permanently, right? And so they charge a premium for that. But not only that, I think also, remember, students in Canada who are domestic students, so whether you're a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen, you would be a domestic student, their tuition is subsidized. So that's a part of the reason why they pay less, because the schools will get government subsidies that will offset the cost of studies for Canadians to keep the cost of tuition low. So that's also another factor. But yes, international students do pay a premium. And that's why when you choose your school and your program, you want to make sure that you can get some benefit from it. It's not just for PR, right? You can find a job. It can help you to gain work experience in Canada and stuff like that. So, but there are rules around choosing your program. So that's thing. All right. So proof of funds. So most of you may or may not know that the government made some recent changes. That's one of the other changes that were made. And this one was effective on January 1st of this year, where they changed the proof of funds requirement for international students. So this is what you would have needed before, 10,000. So you needed 10,000 for your living expenses in order to apply. This is not for step one when we talk about applying to this school. This is for step two, when you're applying for your study permit. So you'll need 10,000, or previously you would have needed 10,000 for yourself, and then 4,000, and then 3,000 for each family member after. Now those amounts have increased. So this is what it looks like now currently. So currently you are gonna need 20,635 if it's just you that's coming. And this does not include your tuition. So you're going to need this 20,635 plus the cost of your tuition for the first year. If you're bringing additional family members, then there is that incremental increase. So 25,690 for 2 persons, for 3 persons, 31,583, and so on. So you have to factor this into your plans when you're looking to come. Just remember though that even if you do, there are different ways that you can show the funds. Let me say that first. You can show funds using your own money, so savings or investments. There are some types of investments that will not be accepted, of course, but generally you can use scholarships, you can use sponsorships, and sponsorship can come in different forms. It can be like parents or siblings or an aunt or uncle. Of course, when you have a sponsor, there are other documents that will be required for the application process, so it has to be done properly. It's not enough to just show that you have funds. You could have more than the funds that are required, but they could still refuse your application, right? So the documentation that's provided with the application is very important. You can show funds using a loan. So you could get an education loan. If it's a personal loan, one caveat with that is that you must be able to demonstrate that, the loan can be serviced. So usually when we have clients who do that, we'll work with them in those situations to make sure that it's good for the application. And there are other ways too that you could finance your study, but those are like the main ones. Some people even may get like a GIC in Canada to show that the funds are already in Canada and it's for this particular purpose. You can prepay your tuition. It's, that's another way as well. But those are some of the ways. Benefits, of course, of studying. There's the opportunity to work while you study. You can work full-time after graduation, and then your family can come with you. It also is a pathway to permanent residence. So working while studying, you can work for up to 20 hours per week. Working after studies will be, of course, full-time, and the duration of that will just be dependent on how long your program was in the first place. Family coming with you can mean spouse coming on an open work permit or on a visitor's visa, depends on the situation. Children coming on a study permit. In most cases, it will be a study permit, depending on their ages. Depending on the age, they could also get a visitor's visa. When you are looking at an application for a family, that application is more complex, so you definitely want to make sure that it's being done right, and that even if you attempt to do it yourself, that you get at least some professional guidance, maybe get professional review. Like that's one of the services that we do offer. Like we some clients who are attempting the process themselves, but they to do a review of the application where we can, objectively review it, and based on what we know that will work well for this type of application, we can provide a professional opinion on what they have done, what they may need, or what's submitted, or different things. So at the very least, it's serious application. And then of course, pathways for permanent residence. You want to make sure that when you start the process, you know where you're going. So if I'm gonna say I'm coming to Canada to study, and I know that my end goal is to get permanent residence, I want to be able to map out that pathway for myself when I'm starting. I don't want to just come and then try to figure it out, because especially if it's a shorter program, you may not have enough time to figure it out. So you want to make sure that you have a plan in place. It may not work to the T for your plan, but at least you have a plan. And that way you can mitigate against changes that may happen for changes in programs and government policy, which often will change. So you want to be very careful and definitely have a plan. And that's why it's good to get advice at the start, so that you know that the pathway you're going on can work for you, and there are things that you may overlook, and especially where permanent residence is concerned, because some of that has to be planned in advance of you actually starting school. And just like I mentioned before, like you want to be able to go to a province or a school that may help with, or based on where the school is located, there is accessibility for jobs. Generally, once you get to that PR process, a job is required. In most provinces, not all, but most. And then also you want to make sure that you're in a province where it might be easy to apply for permanent residence, or if that province is not so easy to apply for permanent residence, can you move, can you relocate, can you go somewhere else, and how can that work for you? So those are some of the things that you want to be mindful of. Another question here for you guys. Paying all your tuition fees increases your chances of success. Do you think that's true? Okay, I see we're very mixed on this one. See some yeses, some no. Okay, baby. No. Okay. I would say it is in fact a myth. It is a myth. Paying your tuition fees does not really increase your chance. If you want to pay your fees, you can, and it is counted towards your proof of funds, but it does not necessarily mean you could pay all your fees. In fact, you could pay 100% of the fees, and then your study permit is still refused. So it does not really, you have some schools that require a low tuition deposit. So like 500, the lowest I've seen is 500, right? So if you pay that 500 towards your tuition and you have all your other funds, then your chances are just the same as somebody who may have paid 100% of their tuition. It does not change the success or the chances of success for your application. It's assessed on other things, the other merits of the application, and how you are able to present compellingly and convincingly an application, the details that you provide in your application, your study plan, and all of those things. So it really doesn't. Okay, so I have another poll for you guys. I know some of you may have or may not have applied before. I'd love to see who has applied. So have you ever been refused a visa or work or study permit for Canada? That's the question. So you'll see the poll on the screen. You can respond to the poll. Okay, I think we're doing pretty good so far. I'll give you guys a minute. We're almost there. All right, so I see 89% said they have never applied for a study or work permit. Answer is no. So you may have applied and you were successful if you're saying the answer is no, I would imagine. So 89% never applied, and about 6%, so it's not a lot of people, saying that yes, they have been previously refused. And I see some people are commenting that it's no, right? So I would imagine that you would have applied, but then it was not refused. All right. Thank you for your participation. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to touch on like common reasons why study permits are refused. So very high level. So one of the first things will be funds being insufficient. So especially with now that they have doubled the amount for proof of funds. Well, generally, if you apply for your study permit and you do not have the minimum funds that are required, just it will be refused, no doubt about that. All right. So even if the application is strong in all other areas, if you don't have enough funds, your application would be refused on the basis of funds. I know some people might say, well, I have somewhere to stay in Canada. I'm going to stay with family, so I'm okay with proof of funds. No, you still need to demonstrate that you have sufficient funds, even in those cases. I mean, I've had clients where they don't have quite the amount that's needed by IRCC, but they may be staying with a relative or close family member in Canada, and we try to make a case for them in the application. So we've been able to do that successfully. It was granted, but they were granted. But I want to definitely caution you on that part, where the funds are concerned. So the other thing will be poor quality documents. You want to make sure that the visa officer can easily review your application, right? Don't make it really, don't give them a headache when they're reviewing your application. We actually attended a seminar with IRCC some months ago, and one of their program directors was talking about how long a visa officer has on an application. And on average, the visa officer can spend about 6 minutes on an application. That's not a lot of time. So, which is why you want to make sure that the application is easy for them to go through. If they only have about a clock of 6 minutes to review an application of this nature, and they're having challenges even just trying to understand the information that's there, or it's not legible and stuff like that, they will refuse it. And then you have to remember that they're all in one bucket: study permits, work permits, visitors visas. These are temporary residence applications, so the standard of review is different. Also, what the officer owes you in terms of their due diligence and the follow through that they would do for a permanent residence application will be different for this type of application, because you're applying for temporary resident status. They don't necessarily have to ask you for any additional documents. So if something is missing or something's not clear, they can just refuse it on that basis, right? So it's very important that the application is done well. The other one is unclear purpose of visit. So your purpose of visit is highlighted in your study plan or your statement of purpose, or you might hear those terms interchangeably. Very important. And I have that there twice, because the purpose of visit and the study plan, they kind of go hand in hand, but it's actually two different things. You do need to, but we tend to use the study plan to explain the purpose of visit, right? So yes, we know that it's to study, but why? Like there are some questions that you need to preemptively answer. You can't just say, I want to come to Canada and study in this program because it will improve my skills, and you just leave it at that. You have to give them a little bit more than that. And especially in the case where you're doing a program that's not in alignment with your current background, that can also be something that will result or may result in a refusal. So it's generally recommended that you stay consistent with your background where the program is concerned. You want to choose your program wisely. So you want to show progression, you want to show the relevance to your background, why you want to do the program and all of those things. How will it benefit you? Any return plans that you have. So you want to document all of that for the officer. And there are other things like generally our study plans, when we work with clients, we actually engage in writing the study plan based on questions that we ask the client. And those documents are usually at least 3-4 pages in length. And so that's the level of detail that we provide the officer. and it works really well because we have a very high success rate for study permit applications. And to top it off, it's also supported with so that's one piece of written document. When we do study permits as well, we also submit a legal submission letter. So that's our legal documents where we're, again, advocating for the client with IRCC, showing them how they meet the eligibility requirements and why the application should be granted. So those two hand in hand goes a very, very long way to the success of the application. And of course, the fifth one that I have is ties to home country or Canada. Ties to Canada can actually hurt your application, believe it or not, but it's really how it's handled in the application. So you have to, again, be able to show clear ties to home and then show that the ties at home are stronger than ties in Canada. And ties in Canada can be like if you have a close relative, like a sister or a sibling, right? A sibling in Canada or a parent. Sometimes they can use that to say, well, you're not going to go back home because you have this very strong or these very strong ties. They may not tell you in that generic refusal letter, but they may say you have these very strong ties in Canada that are stronger than ties in home or at home. And it could be a case where it's not necessarily the case. It's not going to be the case, especially if you're applying from home. Home is where you've been all your life, right? So of course your ties there are going to be stronger, but it's about you being able to really document that and articulate it in the application by showing them how. So that is where we come in. That's how we are able to really advocate for clients and showing them ties that they have. Sometimes clients will say, I don't have any ties because I don't own a house or, I don't have any properties, but that's not the only source or form of ties. There's always something, right? So we try to help clients to document those things that they do have, the ties that they do have, and show how important these things are and the fact that these are pull factors for them to return home at the end of their stay in Canada. So that's also very, very important. And with the refusals as well, we do handle a number of previously refused applications. Do a lot of those. So I'll get a lot of study permit clients who were refused before, and we help them with getting their case notes and then doing, a subsequent application, or whether it is reconsideration or other options. It just depends on the particular situation. If you have been previously refused, there's still hope. It can be overcome. It does take some work, but it can be overcome. I just had one today where one of my clients got approved today, and she was previously refused. She did herself initially and was previously refused, and so we helped her with the new application before the new proof of funds changes came into effect. With the study permit option, you have the opportunity to work in Canada, like I mentioned, access to, in Canada, permanent residency programs. I think this is very important, especially for those who are looking at it as a long-term way to come to Canada, right? Your ability to access permanent residency programs that you cannot now access by virtue of you being outside Canada and having never studied or worked in Canada. This will be a really good pathway in that case, especially if you're not so attractive in some of the other permanent residency programs like Express Entry and the other federal programs. This will be a really great pathway for you. As I mentioned last night, I have a client who we started at 50. She's still here. She came, she studied as a 50-year-old, enrolled in studies in Canada. And right now we're just about to apply for permanent residency. So, it's very possible. And she didn't come on her own. She came with dependent children, a dependent child. So it's very possible, regardless of age. It is a pathway that anyone can pursue as long as you can show how you meet the requirements for the program. I already mentioned about working full-time post-studies and working for up to 20 hours. There's some discussion right now going on with government to increase the number of hours that international students can work to 30 hours per week. It's not law, it's just in discussion right now, something that's being reviewed. So there's that possibility. They're trying to balance the fact that you are a student and they want you to study full-time and not like be committed to working. So they would not increase it any more than that. But there's some discussion around increasing it. There are some students currently who can work full-time while they're studying. And that policy is in place up until April. So, and then in terms of like what's happening currently where study permits are concerned. So there's some talk right now that's going on within government, and it's all, a lot of it really is politics. But so there are talks happening right now about potentially capping the number of study permits that are, like I showed you before, we have over 900,000 last year. So there are talks about capping study permits, capping work permits as well, basically capping the number of temporary residents that are being allowed into Canada. And we'll see what more information is shared on that, but those are the discussions that are happening right now within government. And I say all of this to say, well, if you have the opportunity to make that move, do not hesitate. Just like there's a lot of people who wanted to do this from last year or even before, and they hesitated. And now 2024, the funds requirements have gone up significantly. And there can be more changes. If they talk about a cap, that cap can be filled up pretty quickly, especially with the larger countries where India and China, the Philippines, a lot of the student population will come from those countries, right? And they can easily fill the cap very quickly. So if you are in the position where you can make it work for you as soon as possible, then you definitely want to work towards that, because you don't know how things will change. This is immigration. It changes very, very frequently. That's one thing that's constant with immigration. It will be changed because it's all government regulated and government policy. It can change under one government. It can change within government. So definitely, and just as I mentioned last night too, even with the permanent residency programs, you want to apply as soon as even before you think you're ready, you want to start the process, essentially. And I talked about the opportunity to apply for a spousal open work permit, which has been really great for a lot of our spouses. We've had some who came here visiting, and we helped them to get the spousal work permit while they're here, sending them to the border where they can get it on spot. So it depends though on the individual situation, but that's something that has worked as well for our clients. And I'm gonna go to a case study and we're going to wrap up shortly. I'll get to your questions after. I'm going to play the audio for and this was one of my clients who actually came here as an international student, and you'll hear from her. As soon as I play the audio, just let me know that in the chat. Just give me a thumbs up or a yes if you can hear.
Thank you, Kay, for inviting me to share. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you. So, my experience so far, I must say firstly that Kay has made the experience very manageable. I don't regret using Kay. That's the first thing I must say. So I wanted to come to Canada primarily because, there's better employment and education opportunities. And then there was that issue of safety because I have a young child and I was getting concerned about, things, the crime rates and so in my own country. So I decided that, it's probably best for us to leave. So I came via the study program. How I ended up, that was not my first option really. But what I noticed is that, so initially I tried going first entry because, I have all these qualifications up to my master's, lots of experience in like the banking and financial sector. So, I saw like even my colleagues going through express entry and being successful. So I tried that route, but for years, I kept, going back in the pool, paying money to do IELTS, everything, not being selected. And this went on for a better part of 4 years. So I actually said, okay, maybe I need to try a different route. And it's funny because I was actually at work one day and I was on Instagram. Yes, I was on Instagram at work. And I saw an ad about Northern Connections. I'm like, what is this Northern Connections? So I thought it was just another, because you always see them on Instagram, these consultants advertising. But for some reason, I decided to look at it and I kind of went and did some research and background because I tried a consultant before from my own country, but that went nowhere, a very popular one, and that didn't go anywhere. As a matter of fact, when I did the initial consultation, I didn't go any further because it just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel like that was for me, so I didn't continue with them. So I saw the ad about Northern Connection, and I just went on the website with my consultation, and when I had the consultation with Kay, and I was expecting that it would have been a similar experience as with the previous consultant, but it actually wasn't. Kay actually went into my profile and she went in, she looked at it, she scrutinized it, and she said, oh, this is what it is. And she was already telling me, probably this is why you're not being selected. I was even in a provincial nominee program. She went into that profile and she advised me and she told me, okay, these are the reasons you might not yet be successful. And I just had a good feeling about it that I decided to continue with her. And I even went as far as to book a consultation for my sister. That's how confident I felt already just by that initial contact with her. I went and booked one for my sister and she did it. And we both decided to go along. So we needed help navigating the process, like, applying to the school, everything, because this is not something I was really familiar with. I was more doing my research along the lines of express entry, and provincial nomination and stuff like that. I didn't know anything about the studying route. But they did everything. I mean, I said everything. So all I had to do was submit documents. When the time came to submit documents, if I needed to sign anything, I would sign it. But she did everything and she was there every step of the way, advising us, telling us what to do, reassuring us that everything was okay. All the skepticism went out the window. We just, I remember even telling my mother, Mommy, I have a good feeling about Kay. I don't feel like she's like those others. I just have a good feeling about it. And we were both successful. We came to Canada last December, as in December 2021, not 2022, December 2021. We did 1-year programs, so we're both finished now. And we're about to apply for our postgraduate work permits. We both have jobs. We came with our children. So I came with my daughter, she came with her son. And I find that my experience working with Northern Connections and with Kay in particular, she's very helpful, she's attentive, she's reliable, resourceful. I will message Kay. Kay will tell you I'll message her like something will happen and I start panicking and I will be like, Kay, at 11 o'clock in the night. Though I'm not telling you to do that to Kay, please don't. But then she will answer same way that late and she's like, don't worry about it. And she right away she's like, why are you panicking? She's always so calm. And she said, oh, you just need to do this, and then everything works out and you're fine again. And she and her team, they're very knowledgeable and you will definitely get personalized service that's tailored to meet your specific needs. And so far, how we're enjoying Canada, well, apart from the cold, it's been good. I mean, the kids love the cold. They love the cold. You know, they're into snow and all of that. And, you know, us adults is a different story. But, I mean, it's not cold all year round. So, you know, once the cold goes, then you're fine. So we're enjoying it so far. And I would recommend anyone to use Kay as a consultant. You will not be disappointed in any way, shape, or form. And when I say Kay helps you with everything, I do mean she helps you with every single detail, everything, every solitary thing. She'll give you advice. If she herself can't help you, she'll find someone who can help you. And the good thing about it is that she would have that experience working with multiple clients. So I'm sure she's seen it all. And she's telling you, know, she deals with a lot of refusals and things like that. So it's like you on your own will be able to preempt things that she would. But you know, that's one of the things that, you know, made me decide to go with her and stick with her all this time. And my advice for all of you that want to come to Canada, just get started. Like, you're not gonna have everything figured out. I was one of those persons who, oh, I need to have this in place first. I need to have plan A right down to Z. That's me. But this whole Canada thing for me is like, maybe I only was able to have a plan A and B. And it's just something you have to start. You can't stop and say, I have to wait until, because I think that's the only regret I have, that I hadn't started sooner, because all those things that I was waiting on still never materialized. But I did decide to start, and I find that, oh, but what was I getting all worked up about? Like, I could have done this long ago. So don't be discouraged. Don't think you can't do it. Don't say, I don't have enough money. I don't have it. Listen, none of that. Just do it. Just start. And you're going to see things just start falling into place. So, my experience so far.
All right, guys. So you would have heard from Monique, who shared her experience just going through the immigration process and by extension working with us. So I am going to go into the Q&As. I'm going to go to that. Similar to what we did last night, I have on the screen the consultations, right? So those who are interested in looking at their options further, where studying is concerned, or even where permanent residency. So know that you would have gone through day 1 and then day 2 of this session. This is where the next step would be. If you want to look at what your personalized option might be, can it work for you with one of the other immigration programs, or is the study the pathway for you? And depending on which one is recommended, what do you need to do at this stage in order to really make it work for you, right? So that would be the next step. Where consultations are concerned, they typically are the way that we triage an application. So it's usually the first step in really having a thorough understanding of your particular situation, where we can determine the best course of action for you and what program options will be available to you. We can understand your personal situation and can advise on next steps. We can look at costs. We can look at the timelines that are involved. We can look at documents that you need to gather for the process. And we can also advise in terms of a longer term immigration strategy, depending on the pathway that you're going. We have some clients who try to hedge their bets. So they will look at one option as a primary way, but then we will have a plan in place for another option should the primary way that they're looking at not really work out. Right? So there are different ways that this can be done. Let me go into the question, but before I go there, yeah, with the particular, because we're doing a study session tonight, that's why we're offering you the 10% off the study consultations in particular. It's just for that one. If you were here last night, you would have seen that we did offer a code for a different type of consultation, but this would be where we would start working with you if you're looking for support with that particular process. And so with the coupon code, there would be a 10% off the consultation. But let me go to the Q&As. Flora Lee, so you know what, and that's the purpose of the session, right? To be able to, I wouldn't be able to, there's quite a bit of people on here tonight. Of course, I wouldn't be able to tell you which is gonna be the best path for you, because it's gonna be different for each person. So that is the one of the end goal of the consultation, to be able to advise you of which pathway would be the most appropriate for you, for your family, if you have a family that's coming with you, and how it can work, what to bear in mind, what timelines are in place, all of those things. So it would, I would be lying if I could look at each of you and say, all right, this is gonna work for you, because I wouldn't know enough about you to really be able to answer that question accurately. So that is the purpose of the consultation. So I'm gonna look at some of the questions quickly. Some I may or may not be able to to even understand or to answer. So somebody is saying, I would like to know if I could carry my common law spouse with me, or if we have to be married first. That's a good one. So Canada does recognize common law unions. So if you are coming to Canada in one way, shape, or form, yes, your common law partner can be included in that application. So you would not necessarily need to get married first, unless it's something that you want to do first. Another question is if we only assist those who are looking to come to Saskatchewan. So as you know, as I introduced before, I am based in Saskatchewan, in Regina, to be exact. And no, we don't just assist clients who are going to Saskatchewan. I have clients across Canada. So if you're going to Ontario, if you're going to Alberta, wherever it is that you're going in Canada, we can definitely support you in different ways. But yes, we can assist you with all immigration programs where Canada is concerned, or licensed through CICC, as I mentioned earlier. It's a federal license, so immigration is actually regulated federally, and we can operate throughout Canada, and we can assist clients going to any province. Right, so somebody, does the monthly child benefit apply for a person studying? It does. But if you're studying, you'll have to be in Canada for at least 18 months. So it's not gonna take effect while you're studying, unless you're gonna do a 2-year program, really. But if you're in Canada for at least 18 months, yes, you would get that benefit. I have clients who are not yet permanent residents, and they do get the monthly child benefit. What is the average cost of your service after the consultation? Our service fees will vary. So, and that's why you'll not see them posted on our website, because they will vary based on the type of application that we're doing and the complexity of the application. We do offer different service packages. So we have full representation, where we do everything, just as Monique mentioned. So with a full representation, we literally handle all the details of the application. And of course, it's a collaborative process. So we do include the client, so you know what's happening, right, with your application at different points. But we do handle all the details. So that's full representation. We have application review. So this is where you prepare your own application, and we just, it would be a one-time review of the application. So that's what we offer at the moment. And the review service would apply to some types of applications. So currently we do permanent residence application, all programs, right? Provincial nominee programs, express entry, different federal programs. We do work permit application, extension of status application. You may have previously refused application, work permit, study permit. So we do all of those things, visas, but we have different levels of services that are offered based on the applicant. And so like our service fees will vary. as well, based on the complexity of the application. Were you previously refused? Were you not previously refused? What's going on with your situation? How many people will be applying? All of those things. So those are all factors that will determine the cost of our services. We usually outline, so once I do a consultation with you, I usually will know a pathway we can go with you, and then I can also advise of the fees, having additional information. How can I start the process of the CPA? So the CPA program is, CPA is usually not recommended for this particular pathway, the study pathway, because CPA is not a full-time program. If you're going to study in Canada on a study permit to get PR and all of that and to benefit from the postgrad work permit, your program has to be a full-time program. So the CPA program in itself is not a full-time program, but you'll have students who come and do CPA, maybe through an institution. So what you could do in a case like that is maybe go through a regular institution, whether a college or university, that has a program that will give you some sort of advanced standing in the CPA once you complete that program. So at the end of the program, you could still get your work permit and you could still be working towards the CPA by writing like the final exams, or you would be somewhere close. It depends on where you're starting, of course, but based on the program that you do. So you have like some master's programs that are aligned with the CPA program. So at the end of those programs, you can apply directly for a CPA, well, do the final exams and then apply. Or you have other programs that will give you some level of postgrad programs that might give you advanced standing in the CPA program. So you have different ways, but I would not say, the recommendation would not be to go directly into the CPA program because it's a part-time professional program where you may not get the study permit benefits. Is there an upper age limit to this process? There isn't. And that's what I touched on yesterday too. There really isn't. And your chances of, there's no upper age limit, and your chances of success is really not determined by your age. No. There are various factors that will come together that will your chances of success. And remember, the different programs are all up. So with temporary residence applications like study permits and so on, it's a little different. It's assessed differently. And with permanent residence application, it's about eligibility. So it's not really about age. It's eligibility, showing that you are eligible based on the eligibility criteria that has been established for the particular program. Where am I? Right, so some of these questions I don't quite understand because I might need a lot more information to answer. But I will answer as best as I can for the others. You offer consultations on Sundays? No, unfortunately, we only work Mondays to Fridays. So usually consultations are done within the work week. Is it just your first tuition to be shown in addition to living expenses? Yes. When will you have a next webinar soon? Well, if you joined late, based on what you're saying, we will be sending out the replays. So, I mean, you can catch the replays once they're sent out. I can't say whether we'll be having a next webinar soon. Maybe not anytime soon. Have you ever worked with persons who are in later 50s and even 60s? If so, were you successful? Oh yes, I had a lady who was 55 and she was very, very concerned about whether the process would work for her. And I have one right now that we're currently working with. She's actually retired, but she wants to come to Canada. So yes, we have. I mentioned last night about one that was she was the oldest that we worked with, which was 50. But we had another one that was 55. This particular lady was from Trinidad. I'm a client of ours, and yes, so we have helped those clients successfully. And like I said, I have one currently working with who is over that age of 50 as well. Age does not rule you out of coming to Canada. It's still very possible. You find that at that age, of course, more planning needs to be involved. So you really need to strategize as to how it could work for you, and looking ahead at what pathways you're gonna be taking, especially where permanent residence is concerned and all of that. So you have to definitely make sure that you're getting proper guidance and that a strategy can be worked out where that's concerned. because time is a factor in that case, right? You want to be able to do what you need to do to get to that permanent resident status within a short period of time, the shortest possible time. But it is possible, and we've done them successfully. I see what you're, so how is it that they want to put a cap on these things, yet still they keep saying that Canada is severely underpopulated and they need people to come. They need people, yeah. I understand what you're saying, and it does feel sometimes counterproductive, but some of it is really politics. We're approaching elections soon, so the government generally has to look at what public opinion is saying and try to make sure that their policies are going that way. But outside of that, I think what they want to do is to pause and reassess. It's not that Canada doesn't need people. Canada needs immigrants. There's no two ways about that. Without immigrants coming in, there will be zero growth in the population, and there will be, based on the projections that they have right now, if you look at the projections without immigration, the labor market will have zero growth. It will be in the negatives, actually. So because there are more retirements that are going to happen over the next 10 years, so the participation in the labor force will significantly go down because of that, the aging population, and then also the birth rate in Canada is pretty low. And that's why immigration is a long-term solution for Canada. I think, though, the issue currently, where you'll hear talks about caps and all of that, is because with bringing this many people in the country, what Canadians want is not that they're anti-immigration, they're not, but they want to see proper planning. So with bringing people into the country, they want to see that infrastructure is in place to provide for housing and healthcare, so that the system is not overwhelmed with the influx of people. Because what has been happening over the last couple of years, with especially people going to the major cities, it helps to drive up the cost of living in those cities. Housing prices are going up because there's not as much supply as the demand because of the number of people that are coming in. There's not enough units available for rent and so on, especially in like Ontario, right? Like I said, Ontario accounts for more than half of Canada's population, that just one province. So you can imagine that there's a strain there, especially like in the Greater Toronto area, where housing prices are sky high because of the demand. It's a supply and demand issue. So those are some of the things that Canadians are looking for the government to make reforms about, in order so that they are not being negatively impacted by immigration. Because when prices go up, housing prices, and the average Canadian cannot afford to buy a house, then people are concerned about that. It's natural, right? So that's really it. It's about proper planning. You'll find that the issue is more acute in some of these larger centers that will have the greater flow of immigration compared to some of the smaller centers. So like even here in Regina, what we've seen, Saskatchewan generally, you see a lot more people who are moving from those bigger cities, bigger provinces, to come to the places. Like Saskatchewan's population is 1.2 million. They just in the last year or so cross over that 1 million mark. That's as a province in right, like the entire province. That's not a lot of people. Compared to Ontario, the population for Ontario is over 15 million, right? So vast difference. So you'll find that some places in Canada, it's really overpopulated compared to like other areas. That's just it. It's just, and that's why they have been introducing regional immigration programs. And the goal of those programs, the goal is to drive immigration to other areas in Canada that are not as populated, where people aren't going. So they're basically giving you an incentive to go to these places by creating all of these programs that will make it easy for you to get your status, and hopefully you might stay there. So that's kind of like the that's the idea of it. Okay. So hopefully that answers that question. I won't be able to speak about other permanent residency pathways that aside from what we looked at yesterday. How long does it take to approve a study permit? It just depends on where you're applying from. You'll have different processing times for different regions. So it depends on the country that you're applying from. What's the cost for a consultation? Consultation, so the link that I have on the screen, if you visit that link, you'll be able to see the different consultation options and also the rates for that. And I think we're going to wrap up now, guys. My partner, I currently live in 2 different countries. Can we still apply together? I would have to know more to be able to answer that. Yeah. So thank you for joining tonight. I'll skip over this for now. That's our contact information on the screen if you need to reach out to myself or my team. As I mentioned, we will have the webinars are recorded, and so we will be sending out replay links very soon. And hopefully you were able to get a benefit from attending the sessions. Thank you so much. You're welcome, and have a good night, everyone. Stay safe.